Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing here giving you a personal prediction for Amir Khan versus Kell Brook. And as always, this is just my personal take. Yours, of course, can be left down in the comments section below. Would love to hear them all. A little bit of fight info here. We have Khan versus Brook, as mentioned, taking place at the Manchester Arena in Manchester, England, airing live on Sky Box Office on that side of the pond and on ESPN Plus here in America. This is taking place at a 149-pound catch weight, so a little bit in between welterweight and junior middleweight, with, of course, no titles on the line. Now, it's one of the most anticipated fights from about 5 years ago. Still, not a bad fight when you consider the circumstances. Both have had some glorious performances in the past, but the glory has certainly faded. Weirdly enough, you could argue that these two were not quite at their peak at the same time, and maybe that Khan peaked a little bit before and Brook a little bit after, so it's quite odd in that sense. But oddly enough, it seems that now we're both fading at about the same rate, and as a result are kind of catching each other on a sort of even playing field. Kind of makes it a more interesting fight in that way, but it's odd how it worked out. In any event, does make it a very compelling breakdown, so without much more ado, let's get into this one and break it down. So for Khan to win, let's start with keep your combinations short. This is an issue for Khan in the past where, because he has such brilliant hand speed, he tends to rattle off too many shots at a time sometimes. That can mean 4, 5, 6 shots at times. And of course, if you have your opponent against the ropes or sort of back up on their heels, that makes sense. But other times he does it really from just out of nowhere. And again, because he has such speed, it can blind his opponents at first. But once they time it and they get it down a little bit more and they weather that sort of storm in the beginning, that's where he runs into trouble with his somewhat, to say the least, questionable chin. You don't want to put yourself in a position where your hands aren't at home because they're consistently going out there in 5, 6, 7 shot combinations. That's just spelling trouble for Khan. So instead, kind of keep it limited. Work yourself into the fight. Obviously, use your strengths, but 2, 3, 4 shot combinations at a time. Get in, get out, and give yourself the best chance for success. What I would also say is use the simple 1-2 from range. Again, this sort of ties into that first point for Khan where you don't necessarily need to always showcase that blistering speed. That's there. You have that speed. If you need it, if you need to finish him off, if you have him hurt, if, something like that happens, of course, you can always use it. And if, in the dying moments of that fight, if it's what you need to try and score a come from behind win, of course, you have that there at your disposal as well. But to start, it should be something as simple as a 1-2 for Khan. When he lets out that jab and he flicks it out quickly, doesn't get over his lead foot, and just allows it to set up that power shot, then a 2-3 punch combination that follows, he's the most successful version of himself. It's when he gets outside of that range that you see Khan kind of run into these troubles where he's countered or hit during some sort of exchange and unravels in these fights. And finally, I would say don't square up on the inside. That's one of the biggest problems that I think Khan can have is when he really decides to get into a tear-up. You saw this with Danny Garcia. You saw it even to some extent with Brady Prescott early in his career, though that he was kind of just caught cold to some degree. But when he gets caught in these kind of exchanges or squared up a little bit more, it only spells trouble for him. He does not have the sort of punch resistance that allows for that. He certainly doesn't have it at this later stage in his career. So instead, he needs to box. He needs to play the boxer here. And to some degree, he's going to have to give in to the fact that Brook will be more of the sort of boxer, puncher slash slugger in this case, and use that to your advantage. Land those 1-2s, use your speed when it's appropriate, and just make sure that you're giving him angles and defensive responsibility to have to deal with instead of squaring up and just handing him this fight on a platter. Now, for Brook to win, I think he needs to weather the early storm. And that's going to be important. I could see a sort of shot-worn Brook kind of getting blasted out here potentially if he's not able to withstand that initial onslaught from Khan that may come. Again, Khan has that speed. He has hand speed. You've heard people like the aforementioned Garcia even say it can puzzle you at first because you're just trying to adjust to it. While I think Khan is a tick or two slower than he once was, he's still pretty damn fast. So at that rate, you want to make sure if you're Brook that you're willing to understand. You got to maybe be a little closed off, give away a round or two early on, just get your bearings about you, get your wits about you, see what that speed's like, and then proceed. But if you try to go in there and tear it up from the very beginning as a result of, some bravado or this rivalry that they have going, it could put him in a little bit of trouble, and you just don't know what his punch resistance is like either, considering He's, been around the block a time or two himself, so there's no reason to test that early on with Khan. The next thing I would say is set up the right cross. I think that's going to be a big important fight, changing punch for Brook if he can land it effectively. The jab is always going to be important. He has a really solid thudding power jab when he uses, especially when he steps into it, but it also sets up that right hand and that right cross specifically, which is why it's so important for him in my opinion. He can really do some damage with this punch against Khan if he sets it up right. If he's using that jab to offset the speed of Khan and really set up those shots, eventually he's going to be able to find a natural position to unleash that right cross and really do some damage with it. And I think if he connects, even at this point in his career, if he connects with it cleanly, it might spell trouble for Khan. So that's certainly the shot that if I'm in Brook's corner, I'm saying he should be looking for. And finally, dig those shots to the body. I think that's going to be important for him as well for obvious reasons. Number one, they're both older fighters. They've both, again, been around the block a few times. But if you're looking to wear out a guy, you want to dig to the body. And I think Brook has the best shot of doing this out of the two of them simply because he has probably a better chance of taking a shot upstairs as a counter. Khan might not have that luxury. So Brook should use that to his advantage. Slow the older man down, or rather the old fighter down. They're both older fighters at this point. But furthermore, it also takes some of that speed and that energy out of Khan. And I think the best version of Khan that can show up is still going to try and box and move. He's going to try to be the fighter he's always wanted to be, which is a boxer, mover, a slicker fighter. At his best moments, that's probably who he was. This fight now means that Brook needs to take that away from him, that he can if he attacks the body early and make sure that he's kind of zapping some of that energy from him. This, of course, will help lower the guard. This will, of course, make Khan maybe feel like he needs to fight back a bit more, which always opens up those shots upstairs inevitably. And, of course, that could pay off quite well for Brook down the line. Now, this is a really odd one to pick for sure, but if pressed, I'm going with Brook. To be frank, both have seen better days and seem in their last leg at this point. Both have kind of indicated that if they lose this fight, this might be the end of the road for them, which of course makes sense, all things considered. The reason I do go with Brook, however, is the same reason I might have gone with him a few years back if they had fought, to be perfectly honest, and that's just the question mark that is Khan's chin. In the fight against Marcos Maidana, he took some decent shots. Yes, he got hurt later on in the fight, but that happens against Maidana. But he took some of those shots. Yet against Danny Garcia, he, is a decent puncher, above average certainly, but he's not a world beater with his power, and yet he almost knocked Khan's head off. You just don't know what kind of chin you're going to get with Brook, or rather with Khan in any given moment. Whereas with Brook, while he's had some punch resistance issues recently, overall has shown a slightly better ability to absorb a shot. And I think that might be the difference when, you've had a long, storied career as the two of them had. I think the guy who can take the better shot probably has the best chance of winning this kind of fight, and I think he does as a result of that. Even at his best, Khan can be caught, and I think that's true now. While I think his speed and combinations will win him early rounds against Brook, I think Kell eventually catches him. If Brook weathers that initial storm, which I think he does, I think he lands a counter right cross that stuns Khan during an exchange, most likely. Khan will rise, as he almost always does, but the follow-up barrage will call a halt to the action, and which is why I'm going with Brook via late fight stoppage, though could be a little bit earlier. Now, the betting odds for this fight have Brook at a slight favorite at a minus 175 and Khan coming in at a plus 135. To be honest, decent lines for both. You're looking at pretty solid value for both. Again, this is not a fight where I'm sitting here thinking I have this pick on lock. That's just not the way it is. And you just never know. It's in Manchester. Yes, they're both from England, but who does that favor? You just don't know about these sorts of things. It's such a weird fight in so many different ways. But decent odds nonetheless. The over-under is kind of interesting. I've seen a couple, a decent bit of range for it here and there from different websites and outlets. So it's hard to say what that's going to look like. But if you can find one that's kind of appealing to you, especially if you're a Brook supporter, I can see a knockout coming. So that might be some action that you might look to pursue as well. But the lines there are pretty decent, to be honest. In any event, my prediction record heading into the weekend is 5-1-0 with 2 exact, should be 3 exact. Danny Jacobs clearly won that fight, but that's okay. Let me know what you guys think, though, down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts, predictions, bets, so on and so forth. Do you think the loser retires? Do you think the winner has any shot of making any noise against anyone more lively? We'd love to hear all your thoughts on that. in the comments section below. Please be sure to comment, share, subscribe, follow, like, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more. And as always, until next time.